Okay, so before I give my presentation today, I wanted to just introduce Claire to you. Claire is um, pals living in the UK. She's one of my clients, and uh, we'll be talking about her test results today with her kind permission. But what I thought would be valuable would be if Claire just explains to us a little bit about the benefit that she found from running nutrigenomic tests and the impact that's had on her before I go into the detail about what we did specifically in terms of supplementation based on that. The first test that we will be talking about today, and the first test that we ran for Claire, was the methylation report. So, Claire, do you want to just talk a little bit about, your opinion on how you found doing this testing and the information it provided you with that perhaps helped you to understand a bit more about your health history?
Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. Yeah, I mean, I think the tests were absolutely vital to me and for me to just make sense of so many issues that I'd had over the years where I'd been lacking in something, was very low in nutrient, needing an awful lot more of something, and also being told by the a lot of medical professionals that there wasn't an issue, that there was no problem, and then that had been going on really since sort of my 20s, 30s, 40s, right the way through, with lots of tests showing low levels of some nutrients, and me also having abilities, or the lack of the ability to process toxins, for example, um, and also not really understanding until we did the nutrigenomics testing why I needed such high levels and doses of something. So it's been vital, absolutely vital, to help me understand my lived history, but also what we do now.
Yeah. I mean, so when we look at Claire's tests, you'll all see that her folate pathways down-regulated, and then as we come from folate through into her B12, we've got some real down regulations there, and that's something you'd always had an issue with, wasn't it, Claire? And you really struggled to get conventional medicine to really take that seriously.
Yeah, it was a huge issue, the B12. For years, I'd struggled with some tiredness and just sort of, things just not feeling quite right. And it got to a point where my hands were starting to turn in, going back some years, this is now, and really not. I think it got to about 2015, and I had some blood tests done, and my B12 level was around the hundred and something level, and I was absolutely on my knees. Now here in the UK, the NHS gave me what they call a loading dose of some injections, 6 injections, and my level went up. But then after that, they said that I could have one injection every 3 months. And then as we went into the pandemic in 2020, I went 4 months without any injection and became very unwell. And so although my levels, according to the NHS, were adequate high, um, they weren't at all. My symptoms were really, really bad. Really, I was really flawed. So what we did is we took matters into our own hands and started self-injecting, and that this was pre ALS diagnosis, and that helped a little. But since living alongside ALS being confirmed in 2023, I now inject twice a week. And when I saw the results that we had through the nutrigenetic testing, it was so obvious as to why I need so much and needed so much. It was all there in black and white. It was a huge reassurance, huge reassurance.
Yeah, because actually for a lot of us, if we listen closely, we we do get a sense of what we need, what makes us feel better, what makes us feel worse. And I do think having the validation of these tests to say, yes, you do feel better of that, and this is why this genetic pathway is down regulated or up regulated. Um, so further on down through the test was your vitamin D receptor gene, which was down regulated. It was a heterozygous down regulation on both genes for vitamin D receptor, and that was something you'd struggled with as well, wasn't it?
I mean, that was off the scale, really. The tests I was having um, in the UK on the NHS again around about 2015, revealed that my vitamin D level was 16. That's 1 6, and that was 2015, and it's taken 10 years to get it to around, I think it's around 195, I think was it our last test, Kirsty?
Yeah, I've really managed to get it up and keep it up for a while now. Again, with that knowledge that you have a genetic predisposition, that your receptors on each cell that catch the vitamin D just don't quite function well. They're a bit like,
Yeah.
can't quite catch it. Um, yeah, and then so another area that we really looked at for you was your detoxification pathways. And what we found was that from cysteine onwards, you had first of all had a double down regulated gene converting your cysteine to glutathione, and then you were absent in your GSTM1 gene, which meant that you had greatly reduced capacity to make glutathione. And then a couple of the other genes as well linked into that were also a bit down regulated. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think again it's just that validation that I might have a small amount of something that is a little toxic and that might not give anybody else a problem, but for myself it can be quite catastrophic at times, and because I'm not really able to do anything with that small toxin level. And I think that was really key in understanding that my sensitivities, as they were called, were not a sensitivity. It was very real. My body really struggling to actually process out relatively small levels of toxic items.
Yeah. I mean, because, when we ran that test, we also saw down regulation in your glucuronidation pathway, a little bit in your sulfonation pathway, and those three pathways do a lot of the work. And then we already knew you were down regulated in COMT as well, meaning your methylation pathway was compromised. And I think just really helps us to see, okay, these three pathways are being overloaded because for some reason there is something going on that is requiring a lot more support than typically the liver might be able to provide. So what can we do to really support that organ to override those down-regulated genes, to override those little proteins that aren't quite functioning as well as they might? What's interesting, just to touch on one more thing in that methylation report as well, was your down-regulated COMT. And we talked in detail about a combination of life trauma alongside a genetic predisposition to not be able to break down dopamine and not be able to break down adrenaline, and that the overall impact of that can actually be huge.
I think, and that's again was really validating. Having had a long history of stress and trauma, it again gave me that additional insight as to why I may have reacted the way I had to things, and the way I do. And that there is something very real that sometimes gets me stuck on things. Some of that stuckness has come out through a clinical label of complex PTSD. And so I think there are elements there that make real sense. That actually I'm not just making a fuss. That this is actually tricky for me as as a human, and in my body it is tricky, and I have that felt sense of things being in my body being stuck
Yeah.
at times. And I think it's made a lot of sense to me and helpful, been really helpful.
Yeah, and I think you'll really understand, when I say that there's so many people out there that have this genetic predisposition. It's very common. And when we do get very anxious and we aren't able to let something go, and we do feel like we're thinking about the same thing, and there's, for years, people may be like, oh, you're just overthinking, or you're just, and it actually gives us that validation that actually there is a biochemical pathway that prevents me from breaking down dopamine, and just to have that awareness of that. So when we are feeling that way, it's like, okay, this is actually something genetic.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. It sort of mirrors my lived experience, really. And so I think, and it's good to be reminded of it. I might have to write that down to remind myself to be a bit more compassionate to myself.
I think we could all be a bit more compassionate to ourselves. And then the last report that, really I think was probably the most profound for you was looking at your hormones, and your ability to break down certain hormones, because that's something that had really plagued you. And do you want to tell us just a tiny bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, from an early age, I'd struggle with my hormones. It's sort of the onset of puberty, really, really struggling, and just sort of having lots of different sort of reactions to changes, normal changes to the puberty, and to the extent that I was put on had a contraceptive pill when I was young to try to stabilize things for me. In my 20s, having lots of different problems regulating myself around my periods, and not being clear as to why. And then in my 30s, having chronic pain, that actually was eventually discovered as being endometriosis, but
Yeah,
that took 10 years to diagnose.
yeah,
And along with that, then came, I guess, after three different private consultations and opinions, came some relief in that I had a hysterectomy. However, that plunged me straight into surgical menopause and without any HRT, for 8 years, because there was this concern about endometriosis coming back with any estrogen. So, what then happened in 2018 is I started seeing a private hormone specialist who's an awesome woman here in the UK, and we started some hormone replacement therapy. And what transpired is I needed really, really high levels of estrogen. And it's actually considered off license. But the levels of estrogen I'm now on are pretty significant,
yeah,
and has actually, though, really turned my life around in such a positive way. And the same with testosterone as well, needing high levels of that. Not able to take progesterone, but actually, it's been an eye opener when we had the results from the tests that you ran, because it was there in black and white, really clear as to why I need this really high levels of estrogen in particular.
yeah. And your testosterone, I mean, you're so upregulated, you break that down so easily, and then
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Take care. Thanks.